And welcome to episode 33 of PixlFeed Radio, and I'm here with my friend Jason Yormark. How you doing, Jason? How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. And Jason is the founder of a full-service social media and content marketing agency called Socialistics, and he has his own podcast as well that you just launched not too long ago, right?
Yeah, about a month and a half ago.
All right, that's always exciting. How do you feel about it? How does it feel to have it out there and gaining traction and all that good stuff? I mean, you do content for living, so that's what makes it even better. So you know how to get it out there.
Yeah, well, we've done a poor job at treating ourselves like a client. But I've loved podcasting. I have another podcast that's related to baseball that I kind of monkey around with, and I knew that I wanted to do something professionally for the agency. So I was just kind of dragging my feet because like, what am I going to talk about? Is anybody going to listen to this thing? And eventually I'm like, just knock it off. Just get out there. Progress, not perfection. And it's been great. I mean, I'm no Joe Rogan by any means, but people are listening to it. It's starting to gain some traction. And, I've interviewed some really cool people. I think the biggest takeaway for me is the doors that it opens, right? Because it's like, I've talked to CEOs and heavy hitters of platforms that we use that otherwise would probably ignore me. But when I say, hey, you want to be on my podcast? And they're like, sure. So it's a great door opener to get to have conversations with the folks that you might otherwise not be able to.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one thing I have noticed for sure. It's like people are open to coming on and talking to you. Mm-hmm. Same here, man. I always have a love for radio and podcasting and all that good stuff. And it's like you said, just get it out there. And it's really cool. Like somebody like you or I, who basically are nobodies if you really think about it. And then and you start looking at your stats, right? Which I don't really try to concentrate much on because I know how this works and it's not going to really make a difference at first. Right. But I do like seeing the progress. Like I do look at it every once in a while and it's like, wow, so many people are listening. Like, this is amazing. We went from 10 to like 150, so you can see like the small improvement over and over and over again.
Yeah, for me, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and we just started. So my whole reason for doing it was to help other agency owners or folks that are looking to start an agency because I've learned so much in the few years that we've been doing this, and if I can help others avoid similar pitfalls or mistakes, then I feel good about that. I like doing that. I like helping other people. So that's really the goal.
Yeah, that's why I did it with the YouTube channel as well. That's how it started. People kept asking me for help, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I don't really want to go through the whole process of creating a course. I specialize on Facebook ads just for it to be, outdated in a couple months, especially with all the updates they keep going through. It's like, listen, at first it's like I'll do a few videos and get them up there, and it's like once I go in, man, I go in 100%, and it's like, nah, I got to keep this up. And people, it helps a lot of people. So I mean, I have no issues putting it out there. Sometimes it can get a little bit crazy with the schedule. But if you're organized, which I'm not a very organized person, believe it or not, but I try to live by my calendar as much as I can. Yeah. Anybody can do it. But which brings me to the content. You specialize in content. I specialize on Facebook advertising, D2C, direct to consumer, e-com, mostly e-com. I will say 90% of it is e-com. Yeah. Which is it's very different from what you do because you guys concentrate on content, right? Which is what we're doing here. Yeah. So I want to hear your side of things because when it comes to clients, they expect results right away. And there's a lot of people out there, and we talked about this before we went live. It's like, we don't go by vanity metrics. It's like, I hate when people's like, oh, you got 1 million impressions. I'm like, great. How many sales? Yeah. None. Okay. Well, I don't care. I'd rather have 100 impressions than, 20 sales or 10 sales or 5 sales than 1 million impressions and no sales. So, but content is different. You got to build up the content. You got to get it out there and all that good stuff. So it takes time. So how do you explain that to the clients? How does that go in your world?
Yeah, we always have to set up realistic expectations. I mean, the majority of what we do is B2B, so they're typically longer sales cycles. They're not point and click products, so they can be anywhere from 3 months to 18 months in terms of decision making. So they inherently kind of come into the conversation with a little bit more patience around results. They know that there's some foundational things that you have to do. B2B is very different. You have to tell stories and create content that draw people in over an extended period of time. So it's a little bit different animal than B2C. Not that it's necessarily more difficult per se, but it's just a different approach to how you look at content and what you need to be thinking about when you're talking about attracting clients or customers that are, the funnel is much longer. So it's really about, you really need to lead with being helpful and with content that helps people make informed decisions and doesn't feel like you're being sold to. So we really work hard with clients to make sure that they identify and cultivate interesting stories about not only who they are and what they do, but what's going on in the industry, and really making sure that they authentically lead with being helpful. Because if you just can't take the hard sell approach in a B2B environment, because it doesn't work, because people are, they're not looking to make decisions quickly. So they don't want to feel like they're being sold to all the time. So, you really need to provide value regularly. So we really make sure that we work hard to do that. So it's very strategic, and it's, often involves fleshing out editorial strategies that extend months in advance, as opposed to shorter life cycles. So it's definitely a process.
Yeah, I have always said that some of my best clients are the ones who concentrate on content, and then they bring, they bring us on to kind of, pour gasoline on the fire and take it to the next level.
Sure.
And obviously those are some of our best clients, because they already have engaged, users, fans, and a rabid, following. And you can literally throw up a retargeting campaign and it's just like crazy returns, right? It's the power of a brand. And like, if you were, a brand like, I don't know, let's say Nike or a celebrity or something like that. When you have a rabid fan base that they love your products and they love what you do, man, when you create all that content, it's like I tell people, it's not going to pay off at first, but you just keep at it, you keep it consistent, and at one point, everything's going to pick you up. All the crawlers out there, Google, Bing, whatever, and it will just spike.
Yep.
But for you, the type of clients you're dealing with, they're B2B. So, everything they do is, like you said, it's a longer sales cycle. So they're more patient,
Yeah.
D2C, it's like, we want sales and we want them now. So
that's tough.
It's one of the tough things that we deal with. But all right. So how did you get into social media? Well, how did you get started?
Good question. So I'm originally from Chicago, and I moved to Seattle in 2005 for Microsoft. They were hiring, they were on a big hiring spree competing with Google at the time. And I came in as a search marketer, basically helping them kind of launch their search platform, but quickly moved from that into social. So around 2005, 2006, before social really, when it was just kind of starting to take off, I got involved in the community team at Microsoft and started doing a lot of work around social and content creation. And that was really the springboard for me. At Microsoft, there's hundreds of different business units. I moved over to Office for Mac and launched social for them for the last physical version of their product. And then, I got laid off. I got laid off from Microsoft, which was devastating to me because I'd moved there for them. Right. And, they had given me a really nice severance package. So I had a little time to figure things out, but
it's still a blow though. It's still a blow, especially if you like where you were at,
Oh yeah, no, I did. It was just bean counters, picking people off. Cause I was doing really well there, but my job was outsourceable. So,
right.
So then I was out in the wild, and I wrote a blog post that day on my blog that I had not really paid that much attention to about what had happened. And it got picked up by CNET. And I got like 10,000 people on my blog like that.
That's awesome.
And I was like, holy crap. Now, what do I do now? Like, I've got all these people. And then even after each day after, there was still kind of a residual effect of that. So I quickly redid my blog. I started getting serious about, how to promote myself. And it was an inflection point for me to like, wow, I need to work on my personal brand. Cause now you get like 5,000 people from Microsoft that are unemployed. A resume is not going to cut it. So I just immersed myself in social media and how to grow my Twitter following. And I grew it up, over the course of that year, I grew it from like nothing to like 50,000, and just talked about what I was doing and what was working, and started to make a name for myself. I got hired back at Microsoft, which was what I thought I wanted, but it wasn't because it was a different team. And I didn't, I had a bad experience. So then I inevitably left there on my own and started, managed a team at an agency, and then just started, managing teams around social. And that's really where, from that point on, that was really my sweet spot. I got onto Forbes Power Social Media Influencers list, which I was like, how did this happen? And then, so everything just kind of fell into place for me in that world. And I always wanted to do my own thing, and had to wait until, my life kind of allowed for a little bit of risk. My kids are getting a little bit older, and tried my hand at it about 7 or 8 years ago, and it didn't work out so much, but learned a ton. And then about 3 years ago, I was really ready to take it on, and I was ready. I had everything I had learned previously, set us up for the success that we've had. So we've been at it for now. We're closing on about 3 years, and it's been great. It's been fantastic.
That's awesome. So if you look back, what do you think is the biggest lesson that you learned from the first time, that you tried to do it and then it didn't go as planned?
That's
I got plenty of those stories for sure.
That's a great question. I just launched an episode on Sunday called How to Say No. The number one thing that I've learned is how to say no as an agency owner, not to take everything, not to be swayed by just money. I talk about how, like, when you're just starting out, you don't have a choice. You have to take what you can get. But eventually you reach a point where if you're good at what you do, then you can be a little bit more selective, and you really need to be. You have to understand who you are, what you do, and what you're best at, and that not everybody's a good fit. So that the number one thing that I've learned is being comfortable with saying no to opportunities that aren't a good fit, which typically they fall into a couple categories. You have to convince them that marketing is a thing they need to do for their business. That's always a red flag for me, because even if you can if you can talk them into it, they're still going to be a pain in the ass, because they just, it's like 2 weeks will go by and like, why aren't we millionaires yet? I'm like, well, it doesn't work like that. So I usually avoid anybody that has, has to
my favorite line
to market.
My favorite line is like, well, convince me, or I'm looking for someone who knows what they're doing. They can what's that saying in English? They can walk the talk or whatever. So I'll pay you commissions only. I'll just laugh. I'm like,
no. I've learned to say no. If I have to convince them about marketing, if they have unrealistic expectations, like, they only want to spend a couple $100 a month on their marketing, I'm like, that's not going to work. Sorry. There's other folks that'll do that for you and build up your vanity metrics, but we're about results. And then, I don't know, can we help them? Can we honestly help them?
It's tough. Like, if you're like me, like when I was starting out and when I didn't have the luxury of saying no, which not many people do when they first go on their own, sadly, which sucks. So I feel your pain if you're watching or listening to this. And you got to take whatever you got because you're trying to make ends meet or whatever. And it's going to be a nightmare from the get-go. But you still do it. And what comes with it, it's not a benefit for either the client you're taking on or yourself, because the headaches are just not worth it. And that person that you're taking on, if you were thinking about it, that means that you should have not taken it on in the first place.
Yeah, it's tough. When you're first beginning, you have to. Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, if there's people listening, like, well, what are you talking about? I just started. Like, how can I say no? I'm like, you can't. But eventually. It's those experiences that help you get to a place where eventually you will be able to say no, and you have to be comfortable doing that.
I think if I had to go back and do it all over again, I wouldn't have taken the full-on leap right away and be like, I'm just doing this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I would have, if you're listening to this or watching this and you're starting to get into it, I will have a job, just have a job, just something that's making you money. And then start with one client. 2 clients, but keep it small and just slow. There's no rush. I mean, you're just giving yourself extra stress if you have bills to pay. Yeah. But I mean, if you're a sales savage, I grew up in sales and marketing my whole life. So I was on the phone making calls and all that stuff, and it was still tough. You know what I mean? So I think the biggest lesson there is, saying no is very powerful. So definitely I'm going to listen to that podcast you just told me about. It just released on Sunday, and everybody who's watching this or listening should do it as well. We'll put the link in the description.
Great. Thanks.
But that's very powerful. And then, the other thing is that once you start working with clients that you actually enjoy working with, those are the ones that you're going to be able to get results for. And then you can build case studies out of it, that you can use. And they'll be your biggest fans. They'll give you referrals as well. So, that's how you grow at first. So the next question that I had for you. So usually when I launch campaigns, I have, a set plan of testing and, how to scale and all that stuff. So I'm curious for content. How do you guys usually, when you get a new client, what's the process like?
Usually the first month, well, I should say usually every time we start a new client, the first month is all about setup, immersing ourselves with their culture, their history, their industry. We have to become a natural extension of their business. So there's some upfront work to kind of get there. And then inevitably it takes a good 3 or 4 months to work out the kinks. So we're very transparent with clients that, there's a ramp up period that is necessary for us to get to a place where we can do great work for them. But typically most of the clients that we're working with are not looking at this as a quick fix. They're looking for a partner. They know that it's going to take time. So they appreciate the commitment that we make to getting to know their business intimately. And you have to, for an external partner to be able to effectively manage social media for you.
What's the process that you guys go through to do that research?
So we take a team-based approach. So there's an account manager, a social media manager, and a paid strategist that's assigned to a client. And then certainly it's a combination of kickoff calls, just basically we have like a client intake form that they fill out. We have calls. We basically do competitive analysis. We piece all these things together to basically get kind of ramped up. So it's really just, a consistent back and forth with them to get all of the materials that we need, do the research, and then start to flesh out an editorial strategy based on all of that, their goals and objectives, who are their target audience, and making sure that everything kind of aligns. And we've been doing this long enough now where there's a lot of repeatable process. So certainly we still come across new clients that, are representing a product or service that we haven't done yet, but that's the exception, not the rule at this point. Like a lot of what we've done previously, we can replicate pretty easily, having now done it for about 3 years. So the process is certainly locked in. It really just comes down to, and a lot of times it's the client too. Sometimes they're very hands-on and very responsive, which makes our job easier. And sometimes they're like, I don't want to do anything. Figure it out. So, and we can operate under both scenarios. It's just, the latter takes a little bit longer, right, versus a client that's maybe much more involved, that we can move more quickly. So, the ones that are more involved are more likely to have success more quickly. But it's our job to make it work regardless of what we have to work with.
So since you guys are in the B2B space, when it comes to these strategies for content for these businesses, are you guys focusing heavily on SEO and LinkedIn, or what platforms are you guys concentrating in when you guys deploy the strategy?
Sure. I mean, we mostly work in the big four, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. Twitter, not so much. I find that unless a client comes to us having been pretty active there, it doesn't really move the needle too much, unless they're super passionate, unless they have somebody because with Twitter, it's more of a communication tool. You really have to be paying attention to it, 24/7. So we do, most of the work we do is Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. We do some really cool things on LinkedIn. We do some so what's called social selling. So we helped, build message funnels and do some outreach on LinkedIn, which we find to be incredibly more effective than their ad platform, which is not it's not good. It's very frustrating. It's frustrating because they have a great platform. They have an incredible professional audience. Their ad platform is horrible. It's just not locked in. It's not, the user experience is not good. It is prohibitively expensive. Like ridiculously expensive. Like the only companies that can afford to advertise on the Microsofts and the big, Fortune 100, 500 it's frustrating. It shouldn't be that way.
I tried it, and it was like you said, I tried it with one of my personal businesses, and I was just like, this is way too expensive.
Yeah, it's just It just doesn't work. So we flip the script and we do sales outreach on LinkedIn, which is much more effective. It's 1-to-1. It actually produces lead gen opportunities for businesses, which is a nice add-on because the other things that we do are a marathon. It takes time. The content that we're putting out on Facebook and Instagram, that's a longer play. So it's nice to have something that can provide a little bit of momentum in the beginning stages and along the way while those other things kind of take shape. So, but ultimately it's just, pumping out great content, doing social sales. I mean, we have a paid strategist, so we elevate what it is that they do on these platforms. And we've had a tremendous amount of success with our clients in doing that sort of thing.
Now, when you guys are doing that, if you're creating all this organic content and you see, let's say, one takeoff on Facebook or takeoff on LinkedIn or whatever, do you guys throw money behind it when you look at all the pieces of content?
We have to. I mean, organic reach is non-existent. I mean, what is it now? 5%, 4%. I mean,
Facebook is 1%. I know that.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, it's just nothing there. So every client that we work with, the only exceptions of clients that don't are the ones that can't. CBD, tobacco.
Right.
You got to get really creative with them. We do some influencer outreach for clients like that. We leverage Facebook groups, community. So that's a little bit more of a challenge when we don't have access to paid tools for folks like that. But the majority of the clients that we work with have some sort of paid element coinciding with the organic work that we do for them.
It's funny that you bring CBD. One of my friends, he's the national sales director for a CBD company out in Texas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we've been friends since we were kids. And he's like, dude, I need you to help us. I'm like, I can't run ads, man. You don't get it. They won't.
That's ridiculous.
It's like it's so dumb.
They have to get with the program.
And he's trying to explain it. I'm like, Mike, we grew up together. I know what CBD is. You know what I mean? I smoked weed in the past. I know the difference. And everybody else does. But it's like, it makes no sense. And
they have to get on board.
So I helped them develop a strategy, and the strategy, it's like you said, it's groups, and then funneling those groups into a funnel, put them in a back-end email sequence, and then selling them an email, bringing them back to the site.
Right.
But it's so much work, man.
It's a drag.
It's like, it's so unfair. I think it's extremely unfair.
I'm telling you, 30 years from now, the world's going to look back at this the same way we look back at prohibition. And it's like, I mean, it's just get with it already. I use like CBD, and I think Facebook allows, with CBD, they only disallow it if it's ingested. If it's like a lotion I think they're starting to allow, but even that, their algorithms, I mean, they shut everything down, and it just takes forever. It's just a hassle. I avoid, unless the CBD has really well funded and understands and is comfortable with it being a really slow build. I typically say, I don't know that we can really help you. It's not worth spending a ton of money. Right. Unless they're just like, look, we know we need to be on social. We need to put it out there. We don't want to do it. Our expectations are low. I mean, okay, then we can have a conversation. But, most of the ones I talk to are, small startups that are like, they need help. And I'm like,
there's nothing I can do.
You're not going to be able to. I mean, I don't know. They could approve it next month. I don't know. It's just so I usually kind of walk away for those opportunities. And
it's still a headache. So with CBD on Facebook, I know for a fact they'll let certain brands advertise, and you can't even make it that you're measuring CBD. So like you see this brand, I see the ads all the time because I follow just to keep an eye. And it's like, it doesn't even talk about CBD. It's like, oh, feel well. And it's like, they don't make a reference to it whatsoever. So I'm like, all I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, they must have a lot of money because the CTR on these ads has to be horrible. And then you get to the site and there's no information about CBD because they'll get flagged as well. It's crazy, man. I told my friend, I was like, listen, man, once they stop with this nonsense, I'll be the first one to be your distributor. I will build a store just for you, like, with my own name, and then and sell it all out of your warehouses. But it's just, I can't. And even when they do, like, for example, the masks, when the mask thing happened, Facebook banned it right away, along with the hand sanitizer and all that stuff. And then they relaxed a couple months later, like, okay, if you have an active account or an active BM for 4 months or more, we'll let you advertise as long as they're fashionable masks and not the medical ones, K95s or whatever they're called. So I had a client approach me. It's like, hey man, can you do it for us? I was like, sure. You know, they let you know. The biggest headache, man. The ad account kept getting banned like every other day. Ads kept getting banned, you know, left and right. I mean, we always got it back, but it was like we could never get it off the ground because it was just flag. And the guy says, you know what, it's not even worth it. I was like, listen, man, I get it. I'm with you, like, because this is a headache for us as well.
It's tough.
So, all right, cool. So for, you know, most of the people that are listening to this, you know, they're either starting out on their own or they're a small business and they're trying to expand. And I tell them all the time, you know, to create content. So what do you recommend for the small businesses and the small people, you know, that are starting out? What is the strategy that you would suggest for them to, you know, to get their voice out there and get some traction, organic traction before dropping all this money into ads?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of have to ask yourself as a small business owner, are you equipped to, are you going to do it on your own? Like, you know, consistency is king. I mean, you can't treat your marketing, let alone social media, as a light switch. You know, I always tell businesses, don't waste your time doing it if you're not going to do it right. You know, just putting stuff out there, it doesn't accomplish anything. So, you know, until you are ready to do it the right way, don't do it. You know, concentrate on the things that you know that you're going to do well and do right. So you kind of have to make a determination. Are we equipped to manage this internally, or do we need to get help? You know, that's the first thing that you need to kind of establish. And, you know, getting help means, you know, it's tough. The first time I started an agency, I worked with small businesses. Now, small business is kind of a vague term these days because, you know, sometimes, like, if you look at the government, like, small business could be anything under like
40 million.
Right, exactly. To me, that's not small business. To me, small business is less than $1 million, basically.
Yeah, it's mom and pop, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever. You know what
now,
I mean?
You know, shops like that aren't going to be able to probably afford spending a couple $1,000s a month for an agency to manage this for them. And honestly, that's what it takes. You know, if you really want to deliver results, you're looking at a couple $1,000s a month to get, you know, experienced to get an experienced consultant and or agency that knows what they're doing and is actually going to produce measurable results for you. If you're, you know, if you can only afford a couple $100s a month, you got to do it internally. You're not going to, you know, don't waste your money spending less than $1,000 on somebody doing your social media, because all that's going to do is check that box. Yay, we have stuff on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram every day. So
what should they be doing? Let's say they can't afford a couple grand a month. What should they be doing internally if they can only start small or do a couple things at a time? What do you recommend? What do you think they're best?
I think you have to decide what. First of all, I always say it's better to be great at one thing than average at everything. Like, decide, you know, if let's say you're an artist, well, then Instagram's going to be your best bet because it's a very visual platform and people go there. It's not anywhere near as political and all the crap that you kind of deal with on Facebook. So if you have a product or service, it's very visual in nature or lends itself to an environment like Instagram, or even YouTube for that matter. Focus there, do the very best that you can on that channel. And, you know, don't worry so much about the other ones because you're going to be spread too thin. If you're a business owner, you're not going to be able to do everything, period. Like, don't feel that anxiety about, oh, I'm not doing enough on Facebook. Like, no, pick a channel and learn as much as you can about that one and master that one, because you will get far more results focusing that way than trying to spread yourself out across everything and trying to be everything to everybody. Now I will say, you know, Facebook has kind of a light version of an ad platform. So, you know, if you're wanting to spend a few bucks on ads or, you know, promoting your content, that's probably the easiest path to success. You know, you have a page, you don't have to deal with, you know, Facebook's business manager, which is a heavy lift. You know, you can just promote your content and do some simple things through your page on Facebook. That's pretty simple. Right. So, you know, definitely if you're looking to spend money, I think that's the place to do that. And then, you know, aside from that, it's consistency. You know, I think it's just, you don't want to get in a situation where you're like, what am I going to post today? Don't be that person. Carve out a couple hours on Sunday and have that be your social media content time where you're going to think through, and it doesn't have to be a month in advance. I mean, we work a month in advance. Maybe it's a week. You know, think about what you want to put out for the week, create it all then, schedule it all then, you know, get everything planned out. Then you're not having to do as much during the week. Like, don't get into a situation where you're like, every day you're trying to do something. So you really need to kind of think ahead. So, I mean, those are the things that I would, if I were a small business owner, that's the approach that I would take. But it's not easy. You know, at some point and this is what I tell business owners too, look, you're either comfortable being who you are and not much more than that. And what I've just described is totally fine for you. But if you're the business owner that wants to double, triple, quadruple, you want to build an empire, at some point, you have to be comfortable with risk. You're going to have to spend more than you're comfortable with, and just make sure you do it with somebody that you trust and that you vetted out, knowing that that investment eventually is going to pay off. So you sometimes you have to take a couple steps back to take the steps forward that you want to. You're going to have to, make some investments and making bigger moves. Working with an agency is always going to be cheaper than hiring a person. You know, I always say that, like, no matter what anybody pays for us, it's going to be,
50, we know how much we know how much it costs to get it done in-house. If you were hiring somebody that knows what they're doing. Yeah. And, of course, we're not going to charge you the same because we'll always, business.
It's always a better option. It's going to be less expensive, and you're just going to get more breadth and depth because you're getting a team versus one person who's honestly, they can't match 2, 3, 4, 5 people. It's just,
I tell people all the time, listen, if you're getting somebody in your office that works for you doing this, right, it's probably a junior, quote unquote, junior media buyer, which is fine. So everybody has to start somewhere. There's nothing wrong with that. I learned on my own dime, so I have a different point of view. Yeah. But, they're not, those people 99.999% of the time, they're not as passionate about this as, as Jason and I are. You know what I mean? We live and breathe this stuff. That's why we talk about it 24/7. Yep. So it's a different approach. Most kids, I keep saying kids, but most people that you hire, out of college with a quote unquote marketing degree, or, or they've been working in marketing for, companies out there, it's not the same approach that we look at and the way we do it, because I can tell you right now, they don't teach this in college. They still, I don't even think they've gotten even the hang of it. And even if they try to add it to their curriculum for the year, by the time they add it and they start teaching it, it's already obsolete.
No, I always say I wouldn't say I wasted money on college, but everything that I know and everything that I know and everything that I did was outside the classroom. Yeah. I think we just live in a different world where, there's plenty of ways to build a successful path for yourself that don't necessarily involve getting an education. I mean, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or things that really lend themselves to that path, obviously it makes sense. But honestly, if you're going to be a digital marketer, I don't know. I mean, I think you'd be better off, getting some experience and self-learning, and there's a lot of other ways to kind of get there.
Actually, my wife and I, we have this discussion all the time because we just had our kid a year ago, and she's an attorney. So obviously she went to school for that a long time and, graduated like summa cum laude and the whole 9 yards. And it's like she tells me, she's like, you better tell him to go to college. Like, I know you dropped out and you're great, but I want him to go to college. I'm like, listen, if he wants to be a doctor, engineer, lawyer, go to college full on. I'll pay for it. You know what I mean? But it's like, if he's going to come to me and tell me that he's going to get an arts degree, I was like, go paint and post it on the Instagram. You know what I mean? I'll pay for the ads to get it going because it'll be cheaper. But that's another good point that you made about selecting the platform like that you're good at and that stands out for you, that you feel comfortable with, and where your audience is. Like, for example, when TikTok started, gaining traction, it used to be Musical.ly, and once it switched over to TikTok, I started playing with it because I'm like, okay, this is going to be big. And like any other platform, when it starts, the organic reach is massive. I mean, because there's no restrictions. They want you to get hooked. And I tried it, man, doing it for my own thing, and it's just like, I was like, you know what, this is not for me. It's not. That's not where most of my audience is right now, and it's just I don't have the time to make for it to work. You can't just do the same thing that you would do on YouTube on TikTok. It has to match the platform, and it's just like, I'm not creative like that. So I concentrate on YouTube and I concentrate on Facebook. Those are my strengths, and that's where it's at for me, at least. I haven't touched TikTok personally or professionally. It's just like.
Man, I'm lucky that B2B, B2B doesn't really, that's not a place for that, at least as it currently stands. So we know our lane, we stay in it.
Well, I play with it for DTC,
Yeah.
It's really good for DTC products. I've been running ads for it, but it's not something that I offer. But listen, Jason, man, thank you so much for coming on. We're
Absolutely.
unfortunately out of time. We've been going for almost 40 minutes. And
Yeah.
Anyway, where can they find you, man? Give me all the links, social profiles, all that good stuff. Anybody who's looking to use your services for content marketing, B2B, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find us at socialistics.com. Everything's there. Our podcast, our company. We're on all of the, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just that's the nice thing about having a unique name. If you just search for Socialistics, you'll find us. But our podcast is really just about helping agency owners and startup agency owners just to learn about what we've failed at, what's worked for us, and everything in between. So socialistics.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And everybody who's watching, remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel or the podcast if you're listening to the podcast. And then I will see you guys in the next episode. Jason, thank you so much again, man. I really appreciate it.
Sure.